hello, hello, hello. We are back once again with another episode of the Corona Spotlight 2020. Hello, hello. I am your host, Gayle Nicholson. I'm so glad to be with you today. We have a new studio space and everything. Very, very cool stuff. And I am very, very excited to be talking today with a lady that, oh my gosh, how do I put this? In her presence, you feel happy and peaceful. She is really kind of amazing like that. And I've been enjoying getting to know her better so much. So I really want to just jump right into having you get to know her better as well. Please help me welcome Reverend Aliza Bloom Robinson with New Humanity Now at divineawakening.org. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Gail. Thank you. It's been really fun getting to know you a little bit now too, and thank you for inviting me on. I love anytime we can connect with people. I've been running my own interviews, so I was saying I did a post earlier. I'm like, I wonder how I'll do on the other side of the mic today.
You so far doing great. You're doing great. Awesome. Now, I just kind of wanted to check in with you because I came to know you through Therese Skelly's stuff. I know that you're an ordained Unity minister and that you recently lived in Phoenix near where I do. Were you attending Unity, Renaissance, excuse me, not Renaissance Unity. It's the one from Phoenix.
Unity of Phoenix.
Thank you. Yeah, because
No, I don't. When I'm in Phoenix, we're snowbirds.
ah,
So we're in Phoenix half the year, but we're way out in East Mesa. So Richard Rogers and Richard Mirage are my friends, are my buddies. I've known them for years. Actually worked with Richard Mirage when I was right out of school, some 20 years ago. But no, I didn't ever attend up there.
gotcha. Gotcha. I just love both of them. Both
Yeah.
of the Richards, especially Richard Mirage. I remember one time a friend of mine, one of the security guys at the Phoenix Suns basketball team was trying to date a friend of mine and gave her courtside tickets. And the following Sunday, I showed up at church, and Richard's like, "Hey, didn't I see you on TV last week?" I'm like, "Yep, that was me. That was me. That was a blessing. That was a gift right there."
Yeah.
All right, so I am really excited to talk to you about this New Humanity Now stuff you've got going. That is amazing. So let's begin a little bit with just asking you, let's start with divineawakening.org though, before we get into the New Humanity Now. Tell me a little bit about Divine Awakening. What does that mean to you?
Divine awakening is really literal, actually. Divine Awakening is it's my business name, it's my ministry name, it is an alternative ministry underneath the Unity umbrella, if that's familiar to you or anybody. It doesn't really matter, but it is recognized by the Unity movement. And I started that in 2007 when I mean, I've always been on awakening path. I mean, ever since I was a teenager, but when I decided to go out on my own, so to speak, and create a business, create a ministry, at that time it was really about, it was awakening to the priestess work and Mary Magdalene's work and divine feminine work and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So Divine Awakening has evolved in the last 13 years as I have evolved. So it's really now about awakening to the truth of our new humanity. It's awakening to the truth, to the essence, to the essential part of our being that has always been there, but is also ever evolving in its becomingness.
That's
And so
beautiful.
an initial awakening is to realize you're part of spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But layers and layers of continuing evolution of consciousness and evolution of new humanity. Now, I think right now, right, in the year 2020,
Mm-hmm.
we're at a massive awakening into what I'm calling the new humanity.
I bet you're right. And this has been entirely a shift. however you want to package it up, however you want to define it, this is definitely, we are now in a completely different reality than we have been in up until this point. So
Yeah.
I know for myself, I in my recovering from trauma and such, I went through my own awakening as well and coming to understand for myself, personally, that God had not abandoned me. God had used, ways to come in the windows to still progress my life. So tell me a little bit about what your divine awakening was that started all this.
Well, I also have had way more than many, actually. One of my first ones was a deep, dark moment way back in the early 90s where it kind of hit my knees and I just surrendered just to spirit, to source, to creation. So I obviously can't run my life. I quit, basically. And what I heard was, if you follow, I will lead. And that turned my inner being around in a way.
Mhm.
So, touch points, right? The call into ministry was a big one. The call out of ministry was a huge one. The call out of ministry came to me in 2010. So we're talking already a decade ago, where I got really pulled. I think Shepherd's Hook off of Broadway, right?
Right.
Out of the pulpit, off the stage, and dove into this really deep awakening. I call it spiritual initiation period, where I actually just did really, really deep and profound work. And I came out of that at one point completely empty, like personality gone, ego gone, thought gone, belief gone, just empty.
Wow.
And then since then, that was probably by around 2012, where we were doing that birth, birth 2012 and birth of a new humanity. But what it feels like now is like all that stuff that we were setting up in 2011 and 2012 is actually happening now.
Mhm.
And so my awakening continues. Most recently, I'm just playing in this quantum realm with people like really peeking over the edge of humanity itself at what's possible. And that's what lights me up about this new humanity now. And really the movement.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, that's a perfect segue. Tell me a little bit more now about this, new humanity now. It's very, how do I want to put this? It's very intriguing. What's inside there for you?
So, what's inside there is a blank slate of creation. What's inside there is the possibility and the potentiality and the reality of what some people call the universal human, or like we're birthing from the separated human, which can experience lack and unworthiness and war and all of that,
Mhm.
into what we're calling the oneness, which, and you're a new thought minister, right, as well.
Mhm.
So oneness, it's sort of foundation of our whole belief system. And for me, as we step into, as we're pushed or we're pulled into, or as we're broken down to break through, however it's showing up for us, right?
Mhm.
Where the separatedness of a foundation of our being is dissolving and dismantling. And what's showing up instead is oneness. But it's even beyond oneness. And it feels like allness. Like, feel the difference. Separated, like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
oneness. It's like, oh, that feels good. But
Right.
then feel allness.
That is extremely expansive, even from oneness.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's such a power, not a power over or under or through, but such a, well, let me say it this way. I was talking to a friend of mine in one of my interviews, Voices for a New Humanity.
Mhm.
The difference between what we've known as spirituality, even new thought spirituality, and as expansive as we've been, juxtaposed with what's happening now. And it's like the spirituality is really, really rich.
Mhm.
As we come into this new, empowered. It's like, whew, and there's an inner beingness that is being ignited or birthed that will lead us to a greater innovation, a greater collaboration, a greater creativity, a greater kindness, compassion, love that we've known, like what we've known to be the big is now it's just this little tiny piece of what is already available. It's like, oh.
That's amazing. Absolutely. Wow, that's really got some energy behind it. Big time.
Doesn't.
Yeah. Now, specifically, I mean, and that's really amazing, going from the shift from oneness to allness, and the impactfulness of as it meets and rises up. But how do we use that, if I may, during this time of the quarantine, coronavirus, forced isolation? Some areas are starting to open up a little bit. We've got the crabs in a bucket that are still trying to, no, wear your masks, no, stay inside, get back in here, it's scary out there, right?
Right.
How can we use that energy to help us deal with the chaos and the trauma that our spirits are dealing with this imposed reality?
I think the simplest way to answer that is in this, none of the other stuff matters. Now, I don't want to say that it doesn't matter, right? But it is as if what we're experiencing in the world, in the pandemic, in the coronavirus itself, is breaking down. It's like we went on a worldwide forced close down. I mean, that has never happened, right? But it gave the earth and the planet and humanity and even beyond this sort of breathing space. And you know as well as I do the miracles that are already happening on the planet. The air pollution's going down, wildlife is coming out, and I mean, just it's like amazing. The waters are changing, the whales and the dolphins are showing up in bigger ways. The birds here, I mean, and we're pretty isolated anyway. The birds are like amazing right now. There's millions of them.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole reset that's happening. And I think that part of what we're experiencing in the coronavirus, in the end, the reset is like the world is like wobbled. But it isn't wobble that we have access to the new. I kind of think that it's a big setup. Now, I also want to just say that if you are suffering, if you are personally suffering, if you know people who have died, I'm not discounting your pain and your trauma. I'm not discounting that at all. And what I am saying is, and there's something else happening. And the something else that's happening is the access point. It's like a portal opened up that we can have access here. So with my book,
forgive me to interrupt you,
sure.
But I just got this image of when you wrote a plot of land to make a garden, right?
Yes.
For the worms and the bugs and the beetles and everything that are in that soil. Wow, that is tumultuous. That is the turning over of their lives. That is, complete chaos to them. But that is what makes that ground malleable for little teeny tiny plants to start growing, right? And it's similar, wouldn't you say?
It is. Yeah, that's a great analogy. And some of the systems that we've had, our cultural, our government, our climate, I mean, everything, our financial, our economic is up for shift and change. And we're on so tight because it is tumultuous when it changes, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. And it's setting the ground for the future growth.
Yeah. Yeah. Tilling our garden, that's what we're doing, totally, for something new. And I feel like what's going to come, whether it's this week or this month or this decade or this century, is a whole new way of being on the planet. Like our systems are going to be different. We're going to be much more collaborative and much more innovative and much more connected, collaborative, that's not a word, but you get what I mean.
It is actually a collaborative.
Collaborative.
We
Okay.
don't use it very often. That's unfortunate, but now we get to use it more.
Now we get to use it.
That's awesome. Awesome. All right. Now, when we were talking before we started the show today, we were talking a lot about miraculous outcomes. That seems to be your theme for 2020. So, how do you make that happen? How does right? How do we make a miracle?
I think the first answer to that is you can't make it happen. You can make space for them to happen.
Nice.
Right. We were in this, downloaded. I've done Whitestone forever, and I always have a theme or a word for the year. And somewhere in November, December, it's like miraculous outcome. I'm like, what does that even mean? I'm talking to my friends, and they're like, what does that even mean? I'm working with this one client. She's like, I don't get it. And then we started playing with it, and it's like, but what if? It's almost like, what if something miraculous could happen? Opens you. I mean, just that. Like, what if it all worked out? Oh, well, what if it did all work out? Oh. I have lots of examples of that, and I can't think of a single one except for we were in New Zealand in February when all this sort of started happening, and we got called home because we had a tragic thing in our family.
I'm sorry.
And we had to get home like ASAP. And it was like we were on a cruise ship and we couldn't get off the cruise ship. And then we had to get a flight from Dunedin to Auckland. And then we had to get a flight from Auckland to Honolulu, and then to Seattle, and then to Denver. And it's like, it just wasn't working. It was like this, oh my God, this time, it was like this Groundhog Day from hell for a few days.
I'm seeing Steve Martin in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Exactly. It was like that. It was like that. Finally got a ticket change that supposed to get us to Seattle, but got us to Honolulu. And then we're like, no way out of Honolulu to Seattle. It was just like, you couldn't do it. And I just kept saying, my husband was like tied up in knots. And of course we were in shock and grief and all of this stuff with this thing that had happened. And I kept saying, but what if there's a miraculous outcome? But what if there's a miraculous outcome? But what if there's a miraculous outcome, which just energetically just opened the space. And we finally talked to this one girl in Honolulu, and she worked for the airline. And she's like, this should have never happened to you. That was so wrong. I'm going to get you on that plane. There were 2 seats on that plane, and she got us to Seattle with 0 more money. It was like,
that's beautiful. Absolutely.
Boom. You can't make it happen. But my buddy said, we zing it up. We zing it up. Like, what if it worked out?
And that's the key, though, I think. And it's not a matter of making it happen, like you just said. It's not a matter of force. It's not a matter of managing. It's not a matter of any of that. But those 2 magic words, what if? And that creates the motion for the particles to start rearranging themselves. What if? Okay, so we haven't concluded, we haven't decided, we haven't made the atoms fall out of the field into a linear pattern, right? It's a matter of what if. All the particles are in motion. What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? Right? Those 2 magic words, what if, are access to. You can't make it, but it's access.
And the other piece, because what do we want? Kind of, but it's also with 0 expectation. Like I needed to get to Denver, I needed to get to Colorado Springs by a certain amount of time. But as soon as I go, but what I want is this, I can hold that, or what if that or something better. But what if I just go, what if it's a miraculous outcome and I get there?
Yeah.
Right?
I agree with you. I find that if you have no concept in mind of how it has to happen, the way that it shows up is so delightful. Yeah. And so like, oh my gosh, exciting that these things all fell into line. And do you call that a coincidence, or do you call that manifestation, or you know, you get what I'm saying with that?
Totally. Yeah. I was working with a client of mine a few weeks ago, and he was coming to the point of, just he was in a moment. And so he had to say something to his boss. And he was just like, I'm going to say this, and this will be the outcome. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But what if there's a miraculous outcome? And he had this conversation with his boss, and this thing came out of left field, so far out of left field, and was like the perfect solution. It's like, oh my God, I could not have seen that coming.
Mm-hmm.
I could not created that. I could have not even dreamed it up.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really being just open to a greater good. It's taking our whole manifestation and visualization and Abraham work and all of that stuff and putting it in the quantum. But it's got to be like the greater good for all. Like there's no room in the quantum for selfishness, or it's all about me, or it's just like it doesn't even exist.
Well, and those are all the energies that collapse the field into this is how it's got to be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense that there's no space for it. So, let's talk a little bit about what you're offering to our audience today, because this looks really amazing. Okay, 4-part audio series on activating the miraculous.
It's actually video.
Oh, is it video? That's right. Okay, I do
Yeah.
have it down as video.
Yep.
So tell me about this. This is a brand new creation of yours that's specifically created for this show. Thank you very much for that. I'm honored
You're
by
welcome.
that.
I know, and I can't wait to send it out after this show goes viral, right? You know, because then I'll make it available too. But right now, it's not available to anybody else except the listeners here.
That's amazing.
This idea of what is the miraculous, and what this idea of like miraculous outcomes. How do you activate, right? So it's a 4-part series. The first one is really introduction, and each video is 10 to maybe 15 minutes long, so maybe 20. So they're relatively compact. And I did that because I don't like to watch anything much more than that, except for maybe an interview like this that might go 30, right?
Right.
If somebody sends me something that's like an hour and 20 minutes, I'm, oh my God, I can't even open it, right? This is really just an introduction and an invitation into the field. Like, what if you could activate the miraculous? And again, it's not about, I want this miracle to look like that. It's activating a whole level of consciousness that says, I have miraculous outcomes. Place. And then one is about staying out of fear. Like, how do you even do that, right? Because there's lots of us right now in this pandemic that get caught in fear and worry and anxiety about everything. Our own health and the health of our loved ones and our money and how we're going to pay the rent, how we're going to feed the kids. I mean, there's lots of trauma going on. And when you're immersed in it, it's really hard to stay out of fear. But then there's a whole population of us that are not immersed there and still in fear. So this video is really about staying out of fear. And then we're about staying in the field of the possibilities. And then the next one is about catching a virus of love and wholeness.
That's awesome.
And then the fourth one is really about creating a widespread, I didn't use the word pandemic, but I sure could have, ease of grace, of possibility, of love, and really creating that widespread miraculous. So it's really powerful, and it's really fun, and they're set up to come one a week. So you have the week then to really play with. Everyone's got a little bit of a process or a practice or something that you can really put on and experience it. It's not an intellectual, it's not a lecture. It's come experience this with me.
That's phenomenal. I love it. All right, so all of our audience members, and whether you're watching this now in real time live or sometime soon in the near future or even years down the road, go to divine-awakening.org /activating dash the dash miraculous. And this is exclusive to Corona Spotlight listeners for what, the next 3 days, 7 days?
7 days. Let's go a week.
Awesome.
Yep.
7 days until she opens it up to the rest of the world. So grab it now while you can. This is amazing stuff. And then there's another thing as well that you are offering too, and that is to go visit the new page for Voices for a New Humanity. I want you to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so my work obviously is New Humanity Now, and I've got some paid groups and ways to play like that. But what I was finding as I was releasing this is people would be like kind of curious, but they're not really, what is it? Like, what is it? Like, what does that even mean? So I started these conversations, and they're called Voices for a New Humanity. So I'm talking to all kinds of different people just in these conversations. What does it look like for you? How does it show up for you? What are you seeing in here? And there's some really great conversations already live there. We're putting more up, a couple up each week. So that's just a Facebook page, and you can go and you can listen to the, or watch, they're all videos. We try to keep them 15, 20 minutes. I say 12 to 15, but again, we try and keep them short. But lots of different topics are coming up because everybody has a different experience. I'm seeing a deer walk across my yard right now.
Oh, how wonderful.
Is that a miraculous outcome?
Could be.
The other day I saw a fox walk across our yard.
That's beautiful.
Anyway, and I've got a really global conversations. I got people from the UK and people from Australia and people from Canada and people from the US. And so it's really, really fun. Lots of really crazy, cool things, including an interview about light languages. Like, what is light language? It's like, ooh, that was really fun.
Nice.
So again, it's a Facebook page, Voices for a New Humanity. Would love to have you just come on that page.
Awesome.
Play along.
Awesome. Well, I want to take a moment to just say thank you for everything that you're doing in the world and on the planet, helping us ascend with ease and grace into this next phase of the development of humanity. We couldn't do it without light workers like yourself in place, doing what it is that you came here to do and not shirking back from the bigness of the duties. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me today, Gayle.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, we're back, and so excited. Can't wait to see your comments below, and have a happy Monday. When you open yourself up to actual energy work, makes that recovery progress so much faster. That recovery is possible. You do not have to live as a victim until your last days. You have unbelievable strength, and I know that because you're still here. Do you want to create something completely unrecognizable with your life? I can show you how.